Elias Marlowe thought his daughter loved him until the day she told him he was too frail to join the family on a luxury cruise. They left him behind in the coastal mansion he had designed with his late wife, while they sailed away with dreams of wealth and freedom. But late one night, Elias overheard their cruel, secret plan to put him in a care home and sell his mansion as their inheritance. What they never imagined was that the quiet old man they dismissed had his own plan for revenge. By the time they returned, strangers owned the mansion. Their belongings were locked in storage, and Elias was enjoying the life they had tried to steal from him. This is a story of betrayal, cunning, and the most unexpected family revenge. Before we begin, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to the day it all began. Elias Marlowe had always believed his home carried more than just walls and windows. To him, the old coastal mansion was alive with memories. Every stone and beam whispered stories of love, struggle, and triumph. He had designed it in his younger years back, when his mind was sharp with architectural visions and his hands were steady with purpose. He built it not just as a house, but as a sanctuary for his family. A place where his wife Helena could laugh in the garden, where his daughter Cassandra could play in the hallways, and where every room was filled with warmth and belonging. Now, years later, after Helena had passed and Cassandra had grown into a woman with a family of her own, the mansion had become less a home and more a stage for a different story, one that Elias had not expected to live through. It began on a crisp afternoon when Cassandra and her husband Victor burst through the wide oak doors of the house, carrying an air of excitement that seemed almost electric. Their voices bounced off the high ceilings as they waved glossy brochures of an Arctic cruise, the kind of trip that promised once-in-a-lifetime views of glaciers and northern lights. They were animated, their eyes shining with the thrill of adventure, and they wasted no time describing every detail. The luxury suites, the grand dining halls, the excursions on frozen landscapes, the promise of rare sights that few in the world would ever see. Elias listened quietly, seated in his old armchair by the window. He enjoyed seeing their excitement. He had always wanted his daughter to chase joy, to find wonder in the world. And for a moment he imagined himself there with them, standing on the deck of the great ship, watching the cold mist rise from the icy sea. The thought stirred something inside him, a spark of anticipation, as though maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to share a new memory with them, to not be left behind in the shadows of his own house. So he asked in a voice gentle but hopeful whether there might be space for him to join. He imagined Cassandra smiling, Victor nodding, the family united once more for a journey that could heal old wounds and build new bonds. But what came instead was silence, followed by a look between Cassandra and Victor that Elias could not easily interpret. It was the kind of look that carried meaning without words, the kind of look people share when they are deciding how much truth to reveal. Finally, Cassandra spoke, her tone wrapped in politeness but sharpened with something cold. She told him that the cruise would be too harsh for him, that the bitter winds and long days would be unkind to someone his age. She said he was too frail, too tired, and that it would be best if he stayed behind. Then she added, almost as if it were a kindness, that someone needed to watch the mansion anyway, to make sure it was cared for while they were away. Elias sat in silence, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. He had not expected an enthusiastic yes, but he had not prepared himself for such dismissal either. His daughter had spoken the words so casually, as though the decision were obvious, as though he had no part in the family's world of adventure anymore. He forced a small smile and nodded, not wanting to show the sting he felt deep inside. What cut him even deeper was what followed. Victor spoke proudly of how his parents, Walter and Margaret, would be joining them on the cruise. They were older than Elias by several years, yet somehow they were deemed fit enough to travel while he was left behind. Cassandra laughed at the idea of the four of them exploring glaciers together, raising glasses of champagne under the northern lights. Elias listened, and with every word he felt the cold distance between himself and his family grow wider. In that moment the mansion around him felt different. Once it had been his creation, his legacy. Now it felt like a possession that others were already claiming, a prize they paraded through without acknowledging its maker. He noticed the way Cassandra spoke of the house, as though it were hers already, how Victor treated it as a space of convenience rather than reverence. Their laughter echoed down the hallways that had once carried Helena's voice, and Elias could not help but wonder if the life he had built was now being erased in front of him. That evening, after they had gone to bed, Elias wandered through the mansion alone. He touched the cool banister of the grand staircase, ran his hand across the wooden panels of the library, and paused by the window in the dining room where he and Helena used to sit at sunset. The sea stretched beyond the cliffs outside, dark and endless, and Elias felt a quiet storm rise inside him. For years he had given everything to his family. He had offered shelter when they were in need, comfort when they faltered, and unconditional support when they demanded more. Yet now, when he longed for nothing more than inclusion, he was told he was too weak, too fragile, too old. The words lingered in his mind like a cruel refrain. Too old, too frail, too tired. He wondered if that was how they truly saw him, or if it was simply easier to push him aside when he no longer fit their plans. His heart ached not only for himself, but for the memory of Helena, who would never have allowed Cassandra to speak to him that way. He whispered her name softly in the empty dining room, as if hoping she might answer. But only the waves outside responded crashing against the cliffs in steady rhythm. The next morning, Cassandra and Victor were once again filled with excitement, preparing documents, discussing what to pack, and talking about excursions with Walter and Margaret. Elias pretended to listen, forcing a smile when Cassandra asked him to water the plants and make sure the doors stayed locked at night. She spoke as if she were assigning a task to a caretaker rather than speaking to her father. He nodded, keeping his thoughts to himself. But inside, something had shifted. He was no longer just the quiet old man they assumed he was. He felt an ember glowing beneath the surface, the beginning of a fire that had not yet revealed itself. He realized that the mansion was not just a house, not just a structure of wood and stone. It was his life's work, his history, and his identity, and he was not about to let it become a pawn in someone else's game. That night, as the house grew quiet and the sound of the waves filled the darkness, Elias sat awake in the study. The words of his daughter replayed in his head, but with each repetition they lost their sting and became fuel instead. Too old, too frail, too tired. If that was what they believed, then perhaps they had already underestimated him more than he could have ever hoped. It was in that silence, in the deep hours of the night, that Elias began to suspect there was more to their plans than they had revealed. A glance exchanged at the wrong time, a slip of the tongue about the future of the mansion, a shadow of greed in Victor's eyes. Something told him that being excluded from the cruise was not just about his age or his strength. It was about something larger, something they were hiding, and soon Elias would learn the truth. That night Elias could not sleep. The echoes of his daughter's dismissal still lingered, but now they were mixed with a deeper unease. He had noticed the way Victor's smile faltered when Elias asked about the trip, the way Cassandra's voice tightened when she said the words "too frail." It was not just rejection he had felt. It was secrecy. A hidden plan seemed to be threading beneath their laughter and their talk of glaciers. And Elias, a man who had spent a lifetime reading the small details of blueprints and architectural lines, could not ignore the cracks he saw forming in their facade. The mansion itself seemed to sense his restlessness. Old buildings had a way of carrying sound in peculiar ways, and Elias knew every whisper the place could make. The faint groan of wood at midnight, the sigh of pipes, the soft hum of the sea air through vents. But what he heard now was different. As he sat at his desk in the study, the quiet was pierced by voices drifting through the ancient heating ducts. He leaned closer, realizing that the vents carried sound from the guest rooms upstairs, where Cassandra and Victor often stayed. At first it was laughter muffled, but unmistakable. Then came words blurred by distance, yet sharp enough to wound. Cassandra's voice tinged with mockery. Victor's deeper tone filled with certainty. Elias held his breath and listened. "He will not put up a fight," Cassandra said. "He still thinks we care. Poor old man. He will never see it coming." Victor chuckled. "It is simple. Once we return, we move him into a care retreat. Not some dreary place, of course, but one of those polished facilities by the city. He will not complain. And once he is gone, the mansion is ours to deal with." There was a pause, then another voice joined in. It was Walter Victor's father, his tone smooth but laced with greed. "The property alone is worth millions. Imagine the return once it is sold. Split it 4 ways, and we all walk away wealthy." Margaret added, her laughter shrill. "And he has no idea. He thinks watching the house is a favor when really he is just guarding our prize until we get back." The words struck Elias like blows. He sat rigid, his fingers tightening around the armrest of his chair. Every word confirmed what his instincts had whispered. This was not about protecting him from the cold winds of the Arctic. This was about erasing him, casting him aside, like a worn-out relic, and stealing the very heart of his life, the mansion he had poured his soul into. Cassandra's voice returned softer, but crueler. "Mother always said father would need looking after. We are only honoring her words in a way. He cannot keep this place forever. Better it goes to us than strangers." Elias's breath caught in his throat. They were twisting Helena's memory, using her kindness as a weapon to justify their betrayal. His Helena, who had loved him with every beat of her heart, who had filled this house with laughter and warmth. She would never have spoken such words, never have imagined her daughter turning against her father in this way. The distortion of her memory burned deeper than the plan itself. He sat in the dark for hours, listening as their conversation ebbed and flowed. They mocked him for his slowness, joked about how clueless he was, even speculated about how quickly they could have the house listed once he was tucked away in the retreat. Their voices carried greed, arrogance, and certainty, as though they were already rich, already free of him. When at last silence returned, Elias remained frozen in place. His mind was racing, but his body felt heavy, as though the weight of years had suddenly descended upon him. He replayed the conversation in his mind, every cruel word carved into his memory. The people upstairs were not just family anymore. They were conspirators plotting his erasure. Slowly he rose from his chair and wandered the empty hallways. The house felt different now. Not simply a place of memories, but a battleground. Each creak of the floorboards, each shadow on the wall reminded him that he was living among enemies. He passed by Helena's portrait in the hallway and stopped. Her painted eyes looked back at him with the same steady warmth they always had. In that gaze, Elias felt something stir. A strength he had not called upon in years, a resolve that burned hotter than despair. They thought him too old, too tired, too blind to see. But he had heard.